Hello, my name is Mahdiar Edraki. I am a PhD student in the Action Lab at Northeastern University, and today I'll be talking about our work on enhancing acquisition of kinematic data using a NARX network. This work was done in collaboration with Dr. Jerome Zhang from Columbia University and my advisor, Professor Dagmar Stern. To start with a bit of a background, there are primarily two motion capture systems that can be used to track the kinematic movement of animals and objects and humans in the lab environment. One is marker-based motion capture system, the other one is marker-less motion capture system. In the marker-based motion capture system, physical markers are placed on key landmarks of the human body or the object being tracked, and cameras around the room track the position of those markers and recreate the 3D positions of the markers. In marker-less motion capture system, video recordings are used to track key landmarks on the body or object being tracked. Here I show a very interesting example from one of our collaborators, Professor John Mathis at Northeastern, who tracks 3 balls as he juggles them in the air, as well as the key landmarks of his body. While these are really impressive examples, and these are great systems to use to capture the kinematic behavior of objects being tracked, I'm sure those of you who have worked with motion capture systems know that when you collect data from these systems, there's usually missing markers or gaps in a data set at different time points within a data set. And so our goal here is to introduce an algorithm or an approach that can fill those gaps in the data set very accurately. And so to that end, this is the experimental setup we used to demonstrate the feasibility of our approach. We had a whip expert, Adam Winrich, manipulate a 1.6 meter long bullwhip to try to hit a target at a 2.2 meter distance. We placed 5 markers along the flexible section of the whip and 2 markers on Adam's hand and wrist. And we collected the data at a 200 Hertz sampling rate. To give you an idea of what the kinematic data of the whip looked like, here we can see the Euclidean trajectory of the XYZ position of the wrist and hand markers and the markers placed along the whip, with this being closest to the handle and this being close to the tip of the whip. And here is a 3D reconstruction of the whip data. Now, as I said, our goal here is to introduce an algorithm that can fill gaps in kinematic data. And to do that, we take the whip data that has no gaps in it, and we artificially introduce gaps to the data set. We do this so that we can compare the estimated marker positions from our algorithm to the real known marker positions. And so here I can show you an example of that. So black data points correspond to marker position data that are known to us and to the algorithms. However, the gray data points correspond to the parts of the markers in the data set that are missing for the algorithms to fill. And so here, for example, we are pretending as if we don't have any information about the markers of the whip, and the algorithm has to estimate where those markers are. Before we discuss our approach to gap filling, let's look at the existing approaches that can be used to fill such gaps. First one is polynomial interpolation. This is a well-established method that actually most motion capture systems have built in. It basically fits a polynomial to the data and estimates the position of missing markers. The main issue with this approach is that it only works well with short gaps or small gaps, such as less than 1 second of missing data. And as the gaps get larger, this approach fails to accurately estimate the marker position. The other approach is skeleton constraint. This approach works well with data that includes large gaps. However, the way it works is it uses the pre-known knowledge of the human configuration. And so, for example, if a right shoulder marker is missing, it can use the knowledge of the human skeleton to fill the gaps in that data using knowledge from the markers on the other parts of the human body. And so, of course, the issue with this approach is that it cannot handle unmodeled objects that are being tracked in the experiment as well. The next approach is low-rank decomposition. While there's many flavors of this approach, it primarily establishes a covariance matrix that determines a relationship between the different markers in the data set to fill gaps if a marker is missing. It's been shown to work well with longer gaps in the data as well. However, its performance deteriorates as more and more markers are missing at the same time. One of the examples is by Glorious and Federal from 2016. we will actually use this approach to fill the same gaps in our data set and compare it to the performance of our proposed approach. And lastly, as neural networks have become more powerful over the past few years, there's been more work done to use neural networks to estimate missing markers. And it's been shown to handle longer gaps and also multiple missing markers. However, to the best of our knowledge, the neural network approaches have only been shown to work on kinematic data obtained from the human body. And so here we want to see if it also works with unmodeled and flexible objects such as a whip. And so our approach is the NARX network approach, or the nonlinear autoregressive with exogenous inputs network. This is the overall architecture of the network. I'd be happy to answer any questions for those interested in how this network exactly works. But general idea is the known marker positions are inputted through UT, and the output is the estimated position of the markers that are missing in the data set. And here is the gap filling flow that our algorithm goes through to fill the gaps in the data set. First, it identifies the indices of all the gaps in the data. Then it goes to the first gap. It uses all the data available prior to that gap to train the neural network to estimate the missing marker positions in the gap. It fills that gap, goes to the next gap, trains a new neural network, fills that gap as well, and proceeds until all the gaps have been filled. So let's look at the results from the gap filling approaches. So as before, black is the real marker position data that is known to us and to the algorithms. Gray is the artificial gaps we introduced that the algorithms, both the PCA-based and the NARX-based, have to estimate. However, we know where the real marker should have been because we artificially introduced those gaps. And so blue data points correspond to the estimated output from the PCA-based approach, and red lines correspond to the estimated marker positions from our proposed approach. And here we can scroll through time to look at the results from both approaches. And if we slow down time, we can see that our proposed approach, which is the red line, is doing a much better job of estimating where the real markers were, which is the gray line, compared to the PCA-based approach, which is the blue line. As you can see, the red data points are pretty much exactly on top of the gray data points. And actually, if we look at them in the time history, the gray and red lines are practically indistinguishable. And of course, we can scroll forward through time to look at different combinations of missing markers and seeing if either algorithm fails in certain edge cases. And so here, for example, we can see a case where we know where the tip of the whip is and the middle marker of the whip, and the algorithms have to estimate the other markers. And still, our approach works significantly better than the PCA-based approach. So to put it into numbers now, here we can see the whip markers from 1 through 5, the percentage gap in the data set, in the overall data set. So around 30% in each marker was missing. And here we can look at the mean Euclidean error in centimeters from the two approaches. And we can see in our approach, for all the markers on the whip, the estimated position of the markers have a very low error of around 4 centimeters. Whereas the PCA-based approach, the error increases the farther out, closer to the tip of the whip it goes. And of course, this is because it is harder and harder to estimate where the tip of the whip is compared to the handle of the whip. And lastly, I want to thank my collaborators, my advisor, Professor Sternad, Dr. Jiran Zhang, Dr. Reza Razavian, and Alexei Krotov. Alexei is actually presenting his work as well at the AMAM conference under the title of Manipulating a Bullwhip, Simple Control of a Complex Object, which is really interesting. I definitely encourage you to attend his poster as well. And here are the times I'll be available during live sessions to answer any questions you might have with regards to study. And you can use this Zoom meeting ID to join the meeting. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.